Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here once again, and a pleasure to be speaking at 5:30, as always. And I apologise for speaking in a foreign language. I was just listening to Ivor's talk, for those of you who are here, and he said about IT people like to fiddle and like to, think they're doing something useful. I was sort of just crossed my mind. We went to, Ivor and I were speaking at a Danish conference about 3 or 4 years ago, and in the hotel, the system to put a card in the door to get into your bedroom door, the door went beep, 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 like this, you see. And it was quite unusual. It sort of struck me as a bit unusual. It took quite a long time to get into the door, but, it didn't bother me in the least. And I was thinking, what would you do if you gave that to an IT person to look at? What he would do, somebody who's spent a lot of time learning Itil and learning Prince 2 and the like, he'd set up a project, he'd define the strategy, he'd design a solution, they'd test that solution and they'd implement the solution 6 months later, and then it would push the card in the door and it would go beep, beep, and then the door would open. And there you'd say, there we are, a 30% improvement. And that sort of maps onto what David was also saying about, output, outcomes rather than output as well. So that was good. The other thing I was thinking about this morning, also thinking about Denmark, funnily enough, was I was a little bit surprised at, I thought it's been an excellent day, but I was a little bit surprised to be sitting in the front row there and to get a backside placed in my face. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting this morning, and it was a slightly unusual entertainment, which was why I didn't contradict him when he thought I came from Bulgaria. If you noticed, I didn't want to tell him I came from England, just in case he found me. Ivor and I were discussing over lunch the slightly unusual entertainment we've seen at ITSMF events in the last 20-odd years. And we decided that perhaps one of the most unusual ones, other than this morning's, was the guy in Denmark who climbed inside a balloon, blew the balloon up while he was inside it, took his clothes off, and then burst the balloon. That was his whole act. And I promise you, that was his act. It was slightly unusual. Yeah. So I was going to talk about Itil 2011, and they said, we've got other people talking about that. I was going to talk about CSI. Well, we're sort of covering that. So I sort of merged in some assessments as well. So we'll see how we go. Just a little reminder, some of this has been covered already. A couple of things I just wanted to mention. We had a lot of debate about the new edition of Itil. Was it going to be 4.0? Was it going to be 3.1? No, it's ended up being 2011 edition, as you know. And this caused a lot of debate about what we're going to call it, and certainly the OGC and the TSO were keen not to say this is a new version, but this is a new year. So all the 5 books are released, as you know, in July. There is also an introductory book actually coming out. I don't know what's happened to that, because that was written months ago. It should be out anytime soon, but I have been saying that for 3 months already. The pocket books, they are not likely to be out until the end of Q1, even Q2. So there's a number of, the kegs, key element guides, and other books that are produced by TSO. So they will produce some of them, but they're not out yet. So as you saw, generally speaking, for the launch of the 2011 version of Itil, they didn't want to make a fanfare. There was no trumpets, unlike the 2007 version, where We had lots of fanfares, lots of trumpets. We even did a world tour. Ivor, David, myself, and others did a world tour, which is really exciting. It was the nearest I'd ever been to playing with Pink Floyd. You know, I felt like I was Dave Gilmour on tour. You know, it was fantastic. My proudest, you know, we did a day seminar for those who came to any of them. We did lots of events all around the world. I think we were in Chicago, and we do a day seminar, and at the end we have to line up or sit down and sign the books. And I was sitting beside Michael Nevis, one of the strategy authors, who may be slightly better looking than me, I don't know, but and this girl came up to him, and there was a long line of girls queuing up Michael Nevis's column, I noticed, and this girl said to him, "Oh, Michael, I love your voice. It's so nice to listen to you speak." And he said, "Will you sign my book to Mary Lou?" You know, she signed. So Michael signed this book for her, and I said, "Would you like me to sign the service design book?" "Yeah, whatever." You know. So I thought, yeah, that puts me in my place. So yeah, don't ever go on tour with Michael Nevis. Yeah, so this is a new book. If you haven't seen them, I've got them in big picture now. And the great news is there's more swirls. You know, we used to have one, we've got two, and for those very observant, we've really got three. So that's a great improvement, as you'll agree. An official seal of approval, and it now says best management practice. You know, this is a true story. For Itil version 2, in about 1998, I went to a meeting. There was probably about a dozen of us, 12 people there, and we spent 2 full days discussing whether we were going to write about best practice or good practice or better practice or quite good practice, or was it quite a good... And we decided at the end of it that if you write good practice, that means there must be something better, so why don't you write about that? You know, so it was... I kid you not, this is absolutely true. So we opted for best practice. Unfortunately, nobody told the strategy authors in 2007, and they started writing about good practice. And we'd spent 2 days, you know, with OGC and all the other people at the time, coming up with we had to write best practice. So good practice got in there. Now it's best management practice, excellent. But unfortunately, TSO never told any of the authors of the 2011 edition, didn't tell me anyway, that we're going to be writing about best management practice. The first I saw it was on the cover of the book, because it doesn't get a mention in any of the books, I don't think, does it? No, I don't think so. Anyway, there we go. Next edition. It's still the same organic mysteries on the front covers. You know, I don't know if you know, there's a reason for all of these. And this is the operations book, originally written by David Cannon and Dave Wilden. And while they were writing it, they'd send around draft copies to us, and they used to get a copy to me, and I'd have a look at it. And I used to keep sending back emails saying, "What the hell are you two smoking?" And so in the end, they decided to put the answer on the front cover. So those you who don't recognize, oh, there it is. Those you who don't recognize it, it is an opium poppy. Right, so the ins of the 2011 edition are clearer roles and responsibilities. We've got rid of the service manager as a specific role and as a generic term to describe anybody who works in service management, but we've got much clearer roles and responsibilities, what they do. Consistency of the processes. So chapters 4 in every book is the processes. 4.2.3 is the same heading in every process in every book, you know, etc. So that's consistency, and we had to cover all of those things as well. Standardized glossaries, consistent chapters across the life cycle. So chapter 3 is the same, and chapter, it's not the same content, but it's the same headings, etc., and so on. So it's going to be much easier to navigate. Out of scope, as David said this morning, was completely new concepts. I think we've slipped a few in, actually. And certainly, as David said, his book has increased by 40%, which I was a bit annoyed about, because Colin Rudd and I wrote the service design book in 2007, and we started off with the intent of writing the best book. Halfway through, I said, let's give up this best book bit, Colin. Let's just write the biggest. So we succeeded in that. So in the service design book was by far the biggest book. And in fact, service strategy was just about the smallest. And then along comes Dave Cannon and writes a book that's bigger than service design. How annoying is that? And I'm left with CSI. So I thought, what can I do with CSI? There's no way I could make that bigger than the service strategy. So I went for the smallest. You know, I went on the basis less is more. There's a lot more goes on writing these books than you imagine, isn't there? I did want to show you this thing here, not just to go show you that, you know, actually we put some stuff down on paper for these new books. It goes out for review. We update it again. It goes out for review again. So it goes through that cycle all the while. And those of you who've been involved in reviews, and it's hundreds of people, it's really those reviews. And I discovered this, you know, way back in some of the early books I was involved in version 1. It's really those reviews that turn the books into what they are, that, you know, some consensus, and they really turn the books around, I believe. And the review is an excellent way of doing so, and still some things get missed, as we know, but I can't emphasize enough how important those reviews are, and how valuable they are indeed. Right, so moving on to the continual service improvement book. I'm afraid I was left with the same starfish cover. I wanted to change it, but they wouldn't change it. The original authors of the book said that if you cut a leg off a starfish, it grows back again. That's not continual improvement, is it? You know, it'd have to grow 2 legs, wouldn't it? You know, and anyway, why do you want to cut a leg off a starfish? You know, I just couldn't get that at all, but there we are. So I'm sorry, I'm left with the starfish cover, but which was a tad confusing. So I did initially request that we change the name of the process to the 8-step improvement process, but the change at the project, the board that were approving these sort of changes, said that was too revolutionary, and we weren't allowed to change it to the 8-step improvement process. So what I did, without telling them, I turned it into 7 steps. I merged 2 together. It's, you know, I just fly by the seat of my pants. Yeah, so it is now 7 steps. It's documented as every other Itil process, all the various areas. The other thing that I had to try to do, and I don't know, when this thing comes back, I'll show you the diagram in a minute. I don't know whether we succeeded or not, but they wanted me to. There was a lot of change. People didn't understand the connection between the 7-step improvement process, the Deming cycle, and knowledge management. So they wanted it all put into a single diagram, which was a little bit of a challenge. But I'll show you now, as I mentioned it. This is what we ended up with. So if you haven't seen it, so we got the plan, do, check, act bit there. And these are the 7 steps. Each of them have actually changed from the 2007 version. So vaguely speaking, they should fit in with the plan, do, check, act, if you see what I mean. So it's still, that first step wasn't one of the steps before, but it is a step because it's repeated. You have to identify your vision and your overall strategy, but that might change over time. You can't just say that's it and it's there for life. So it should have been one of the steps before. So then you can define what you will measure, and and that includes, what you can measure as well. And as Ivor said in his talk, you can't measure everything. Gathering the data, process, analyze, present, and improve. So it sort of fits in with the Deming cycle, and also the 4 quadrants here, DIKW of knowledge management, data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And again, that sort of fits in. It's the best we could do in one diagram of putting those 3 things together. Just go back to the previous slide. The other things that are changed in the book is the CSI model has been renamed the CSI approach. I originally put that CSI model into Itil version 2, and it suddenly occurred to me, actually, it's not a model at all, it's an approach. So it took me about 10 years to work that one out, so it was good. So I've changed it now. I've introduced a thing called a CSI register. Only a small thing, relatively small thing, but actually it's caused a bit of interest, and I think it's a good idea, and I'm going to explain that more later. There's improved interfaces between all of the books and all the other books, life cycle stages, processes, and everything else are there. There's that diagram again. You just can't have too much of a good thing seeing it twice. These slides are very wide, because on normal slides that thing in the middle is round. Just thought I'd mention that. This is a CSI approach, and it's exactly the same as the old CSI model, basically saying, what's the vision, where are you now, where do you want to be, how do you get there, did you get there, and how do we continually improve. So it's following exactly the same approach as always. And so one of the things we've got to look at is, where are you as an organization? And we were talking, I think other speakers have talked about a little bit about assessments. The need to assess your current situation. I first got involved in doing Itil-based IT service management assessments in 1990 with Dave Wilden, actually. And we did a lot during the 90s. I haven't done so many recently, and just coincidentally, I quite enjoy doing them. In the last 18 months, I've done about 6. So I've just got involved in all around the world, in fact, done a lot of assessments. And I've really got back into enjoying that again. It's quite good fun. But it's surprising how nothing's changed, it's disappointing in some ways, but things haven't really moved on in terms of people's what you ask them before and what you find out afterwards aren't always the same thing. What we're trying to find out, these are some of the things you're trying to find out. Does your infrastructure drive services, or do your services drive the infrastructure? Working with organizations, I was working with one, I've worked with several, in fact, one quite recently, are having another technology refresh. And I said, oh yeah, why are you doing that? Oh, we got this great deal, we're going to do new desktops, blah, 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 and all this new servers. I said, yeah, how many more insurance policies are you going to sell? What are you talking about? We're having a technology refresh. It's Dave's point about, they're putting the money, the investment in technology without any idea what it's going to mean in terms of outcomes to the business. And that goes on, that's commonplace, that's what's happening all the time. And Tom was talking about cloud computing. The drive for cloud computing, in my opinion, is predominantly technology-driven, not business-driven. People are doing it because they can do it quicker. Does the business want it quicker? Don't care, but we could do it quicker. I can get this server out deployed in 30 seconds. How good is that? Was there a need for it? Dunno. But we can do it quicker, So usually, often it means they mess it up quicker, in my opinion. So, it's technology-driven. It's got to be business-driven. I think that's exactly what they said as well. The other measure is, are we doing the best efforts, or are we doing agreed targets with some certainty? How many times have we been to organizations and they say oh yeah, we're doing the best possible job we can with the resources we have. You can't expect us to do any more, blah, 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 and you just say, sorry, yeah, but it's not good enough. That's going to get you that attitude will get you nowhere. You can't go into and deliver something the best way you can. You've got to find out what they need and agree the targets and do it with certainty. Best efforts, not good enough, never were. So when you're assessing your current situation, there's lots of ways of assessing that, lots of things you can be assessing against. And we talked before, it's not just a process thing. We've got to look at organizational structure, people skills. We've got to look at technology that's been utilized and the way it's been utilized and deployed. We've got to look at the processes for sure, how we manage suppliers. A whole raft of things have to be addressed and looked at to see, what's happening within the organization. So we can do SWOT analysis and gap analysis and etc. I won't talk about CMMI now, I mentioned it a bit earlier, but lots of things we can do an assessment against. If you are assessing processes, don't be restricted by the Itil processes. Don't be confined to just what they do. Look at what the organizations do, at the way they've framed their organization. Assess that, because you may find what they're doing is something a little different, or maybe even a lot different, but actually works very well in their organization. I recently did an assessment in California for an educational establishment. And one thing they did do well was their project lifecycle development up to transition, early life support sort of area from an Itil perspective. But the processes they were using weren't that close to being Itil processes. You couldn't figure out where they were, but actually that bit worked quite well. So it would have been remiss of us to say, don't do this or change that. We need to develop that and make it work better. That was the only thing they did do quite well, actually, in the whole organization. That was quite amazing. I'll just tell you a very quick story, if I may. I was telling David last night. Done an assessment of this organization. They'd had a business impact analysis, and it said that they were going to lose $1.4 million per day if the services went down, the IT systems went down. They had no contingency at all, no disaster recovery provisions, no continuity plans at all, and they had no power backup supplies in their data center, nothing at all, no risk had been done. So I did the report, and they said, well, we're planning to build a disaster recovery provision in Phoenix, Arizona, Q4 2012. So my exact words were in the presentation of the report. I said, unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. You can't schedule a disaster for Q1 2013. If you're going to have one, you'll have it tomorrow. The next day, I got on an airplane to fly from San Diego back to Washington, D.C., and they had their disaster. The whole of San Diego, the whole of Phoenix, Arizona, and the whole of the southern element of California lost their power for 48 hours. You probably remember that. That's only 3 or 4 weeks ago. The whole of the power went down over that thing. So I'm very popular there because I predicted it less than 24 hours before it actually happened. I promise you that's an absolutely true story. I stood up and said, you're going to have a disaster tomorrow, and they did. And they lost about $3 million, that company alone. So the advantages and disadvantages, I've got to look around because I can't read that, include these advantages. We can get an objective perspective of the current operational state. We can look at what's happening. We can take an assessment of the current situation. We can look at, doing it, repeating it, which is quite useful to compare where we were or where we are now. So it compares it year on year, and then we can compare our organization with others, similar organizations. Disadvantages are it is only a snapshot in time, and you have to be very careful about what people say to you. And we've talked about this today already. Don't always believe what they say. You have to assess and look at what actually has happened as well. And in the end of the day, it's still individuals' opinion who are doing the assessment. One thing about the method, don't assume knowledge. I did an assessment for an organization, and they said, look, we're really good on our service desk, our incident and problem and all that. We've got that sorted. We've got a big problem with change management. We haven't really got that. We're all right with security. And anyway, went through. This is the CIO telling me how good they were in these areas and where they were lacking. An important part of any assessment, the most important part, is you talk to the users and the customers of the IT services that are being delivered. And when I did, I talked to them and said, well, tell me about how your interaction with IT works. For example, if your PC's not working or you can't get into the network, what do you do? And they said, oh, well, we leave a message on the service desk. So I said, what do you mean you leave a message? They said, yeah, we always phone up and leave a message. Why didn't you speak to anyone? There was never anyone there. All right. So what happens then? They said, well, nothing. So what do you mean nothing? He said, well, nothing usually. He said, we maybe leave another message, but often we'll drive over there because they were in different buildings about 5 or 6 kilometers apart. So we'll drive over there and try and get somebody from IT. Really? When I talked to the CIO, he said that their service desk incident was perfect. When I talked to the service desk manager, he showed me, yes, every call that comes in, we log, we give call numbers. It was a complete rubbish. What happened was they had about 10 people on their service desk. They all did second line support. So they come in the morning and they pick up a call and they say, yeah, my PC's not working. Oh, right, I'll come out and have a look at it. And by about 10 o'clock in the morning, there was no one left on the service desk. This is absolutely true. You think, oh. And I sat there with them, and I could see these people disappearing around me and thinking, somebody stay. I'm going to be answering the call in a minute, But when I asked them about, well, what happens if you, you got some new people joining your department or something like that, what do you do? Oh, we go and tell Martin. Who's Martin? Oh, this guy works in the IT. What happens then? Well, he sorts it out for us. Works perfectly. So in fact, in reality, the change process was working fine. It was anarchy. It wasn't documented. It needed work on it. But everything they said to me wasn't right. So you just can't believe what people say. You've got to observe it and investigate it further. I put up there about, you need to see the organizational chart right at the beginning to see who you're going to talk to, and you have to talk to lots of people. The worst thing about doing assessments is, and it says something about the organization, is when people don't turn up for your interviews and your meetings. And we've done assessments absolutely diabolical where no one turns up, they don't turn up, you can't arrange a meeting. So it's really important that you have a room where you do this and people have to turn up on the allotted hour because you've got a lot of people to see. And it sounds like a small thing, but if you ever do one of these things, you'll know exactly what I mean. We did something for the London Underground once. Somebody mentioned the London Transport. And after about 3 months, we conducted 2 meetings out of 20 that we should have conducted, and they were just never there. They were always, oh, something's happened, we got a problem on. So it's completely awful. You need to prepare questions and how you're going to record all the answers and, have tools for doing this, but you don't want to be restricted by them as well. You've got to allow people to speak. You've got to try and ask some, open questions and get them to tell you their stories, especially customers. Get them to tell you their stories and try and work out, feed that back into what's happening. I interviewed somebody at this education establishment from marketing, and she said, yeah, look, we had... in marketing, we use Adobe development, something or other, the more advanced bit of Adobe, so they could do their marketing designs and all that. She said, we had somebody join the company about 4 or 5 months ago, so they get their standard desktop, but doesn't have Adobe on it, even though they're in marketing. So we requested it before they arrived, and it's now 4 months later, and they still haven't got this Adobe. So I said, well, what's happened? He said, well, we keep asking for it, we still haven't got it. And then when I went through, this Adobe cost about $150, but $150 spent on this organization, this is a publicly listed company, multi-million pound company, or dollar company. It required 2 vice presidents and the CIO to sign off the expenditure of $150. And that's why it'd taken 4 months. And they still hadn't got it, which is absolutely ridiculous. So again, you've got to follow through the process and that, what's actually happened, get their stories, and you'll be able to do things. As I said, you need to make sure, confirm that what people told you is actually the truth. Look at the documentations, observe them, attend, meetings, and observe things in action and see what's happening. In this particular organisation, I just finished it a few weeks ago, why it's fresh in my mind. This particular organisation, I sat on they have an event monitoring system, and when they monitor an event, the guy gets up, he walks down the corridor about 50 metres to the service desk and tells them that this event has occurred. He then walks back, they log an incident, he then walks back, and he's got a separate incident management system. And then he logs the incident. So we've got 2 incidents on the same thing. And then later on, the service desk, and they said, we've had customers complain. They'll walk down here. They spend all day walking between these 2 points. And I said, I got a feeling there might be a better way of doing this, team. This is, they offer IT service. That's their business, is IT, actually. They offer e-learning services to universities in the States. So their business is, in effect, technology. And I described them in my presentation after I told them they're going to have a disaster. I described them as cobbler's children, Cobbler's children never fix their shoes, always have holes in their shoes, and they were a good example of this. They're very nice people, though. I don't want to criticize them in any way. Benchmarking. You can benchmark against similar organizations. You can benchmark against yourself a moment in time and see how you progressed as well, to see whether you are, spending the right amount of money. And we do a lot of work in that. I won't go through that. You're probably aware about that. There's advantages of doing an assessment internally, doing it yourself. It's cheaper, is the first thing. And you have local knowledge. You'll understand what they're talking about. Always when you, as an external, you go into an organization, you don't understand some of their local terminology, what they're actually meaning, and you have to keep finding out. But the advantages of doing it externally are you can compare to others, and often people will speak more openly with an external person than they will with a local service provider. And so there's advantages and disadvantages both ways. So the output of this, and I'm coming on to the CSI register in a second, so the output of this is, you should have a list of recommendations for improvement. And we were talking, I can't remember who it was, and I was talking about this roadmap for improvement as well. So you need this roadmap for improvement as well. This is a good output from one of these, what you're going to do over the next month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, or whatever. Something visual that you can put up on the wall. I'm very much in favor of those types of things. You need regular assessments of changing the current situation, see how it changes, and perhaps full reassessment. This is just an example. This isn't the place in California. This is a place in Manchester in the north of England, which we did earlier in the year. I was just showing you, because we'd done one about 3 years ago, and this is their situation. This is quite a mature organisation, isn't it? You know, they achieved 94% in financial management, which is pretty exceptional, 93% in change management. Just to, I was waiting for the 10, 5, and now he gives me a 2. Yeah. But this is nice. You can see, like the service desk, they were 57% last time. Now they're 70. So you can see that, generally speaking, all the processes that we've done repeated have improved. You can also see that the previous assessment was done against Itil version 2, and this one is version 3, because things like service catalog management and demand management, request fulfillment weren't there previously, so they've only got nothing to compare against. But it's quite nice to present it in that way. When we're talking about the assessing against COVID earlier, the maturity matrices, one of the problems with this is that you have to achieve, one level before you can progress on to the other. So you do often get scores where everybody scores 0. We did an assessment in Africa, actually, of an airline, and they insisted that we use CMMI, and they scored 0 in everything. Which is a bit worrying when they're an airline, but actually, they weren't that bad. I certainly, no, I wouldn't fly with them, but actually, now I think about it, but I don't mind if you want to. So often the reality is that activities are carried out that form part of a higher maturity level, but you haven't completed all the ones below. I'll miss this balanced scorecard, it's boring. Issues to consider after the assessment, and we've all seen lots of these. We talked about, as Ivor talked about resistance to change, we know about that. One of the things that you need, and this is obvious, is you need senior management support. I'll tell you this organisation I've been talking about in California. One of their biggest problems is the senior manager, the CIO. He was very supportive when I went in and did an individual presentation with him. He agreed with everything I said. Yes, I recognise that. We've got to do this and got to do that. And his big thing is, he said, I think this can all be solved. What I'm driving for now is we must learn to say no. I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah, whenever the customers ask for, we always do it. And we've got to start saying no. And I'm thinking, I don't know that would be my big thing in this organization. You said, there's a marketing person out there, been working here 4 months, can't do their job for God's sake. Why don't you get Adobe out to them? That might be a start. I don't say no to them. So his big thing, and I thought he didn't, he was paying lip service to it. He didn't really want to do it, and it was quite an eye-opener, actually. Just quickly about the CSI register. This is a new thing in the CSI book. It's used to record improvement initiatives. And the improvement initiatives could come from an assessment. They could come from the 7-step improvement process. They could come from a change request. They could come from a number of different areas. So it's a way of recording. And I was talking to a gentleman over lunch today, how they set up a SharePoint for their CSI register, recording all the initiatives, prioritizing them, and being able to assess them and look at them. And of course, not everything you would necessarily do. So you might go in there and say, right, well, we're not going to do that at all, or we're not going to do that for the foreseeable future. We'll keep it on the register. But it's just a place to document it and to keep it visible. I have seen this working in a couple of organizations, and it works rather well, I think. So this is a good idea. We can prioritize the opportunities. We can look at quick wins, as we talked about, short-term gains as well as longer-term initiatives as well. The CSI register needs to have accountability. Where it's failed at the organizations that I've seen working, it's become nobody was accountable for it. So it existed on the intranet. People used to throw things in there, and the technicians used to pull things out of it and do them, but they would just pick up what they felt like they would like to fiddle with, as Ivor said earlier. And they literally did that. So there was no accountability for the maintenance, the prioritization, the allocation of who's going to do what in terms of these initiatives. So you do need that for sure. Just quickly, measuring and reporting. There was a lot of confusion in 2007 version of CSI were service measurement, service reporting processes. We decided that they weren't processes, they were elements of every other process, even though service reporting does appear in ISO 20000, but everybody reports on things and measures. So they are documented in chapters 3 and 5 of the book, so there's still a lot of stuff on measuring and reporting, so it is important. Here's a diagram that David used earlier about showing the outcomes and saying that when you're measuring how well you're doing, you have to show the benefits that's happening out there on the shop floor, not the stuff that comes here. I attend a quarterly meeting with part of our Ministry of Defence, and my role is to turn up to this meeting, senior management team, and I sit there and fall asleep most of the day, and every so often I've got to wake up and say, oh, what about Itil? That seems to be my role. I have to just remind them about Itil every so often, and then go back to sleep again. Anyway, I went to the last one, and they said, all right, we're getting much better now. We're resolving incidents more quickly. We're hitting our SLA targets. We're 90-something% hit rate on our targets. So I said, oh, right, is that better? Oh, yeah, it's much better. What do you mean it's better? We're resolving incidents more quickly. I said, I don't know, is that better? Is it better? Is it better? I don't know. Could be you're getting the same incidents every time, couldn't it? So I said, what effect does that have on your business? I said, what do you mean? I said, what's your business? This is the army. Have you been able to kill more people as a result of resolving these incidents? Tell me what the effect on the army has been. Of course, there was no connection. They couldn't see any join. But they have to. You have to see the join between investment in IT, but also investment in IT service management, and the measurements that you take and the reporting that you do. The time has come where you have to be able to take that on to the next stage and show exactly, we've sold more insurance policies, we've gained more banking customers, whatever your business is, that business has been more successful. I think this is my last slide. You can read that yourself, but it says, I often say that when you can measure what you're speaking about and express it in numbers, you know something about it. But when you cannot measure it, when you cannot express it in numbers, your knowledge is of a meager and unsatisfactory kind, which is I quite like. So it's saying, if you can't measure what you're doing, you can't say, look, this is a number, then you're not sure what's happening. That was written by Lord Kelvin in 1883. So I think that's quite appropriate for what we're talking about in measuring as well. Okay, thank you very much, and hope you have a pleasant evening. And if you've got any questions, what is it? Sorry, we've run out of time.